The hidden story behind Iran's leadership crisis. The night everything changed. It was a quiet night in Tehran. The city lights were still on. People were at home. Some were watching TV. Some were sleeping. But high above the city, something was already moving. Far away, military systems had been tracking one location. A very important place. Inside that place was one man. A man who had led Iran for many years. His name was Ali Khamenei. For over 3 decades, he was one of the most powerful leaders in the Middle East. But on this night, everything was about to change. Inside the compound, security was tight. Guards were alert. Everything looked normal. But it wasn't. Because this was not a random moment. This had been planned. Carefully. Quietly. For a long time. Intelligence teams had been watching. Studying movements. Learning patterns. Waiting for the right time. And now, that time had come. In the sky, missiles were already on their way. Fast. Very fast. There was little time to react. Inside the building, no one knew exactly what was coming. No warning. No signal. Just seconds. Then suddenly, everything changed. A powerful strike hit the compound. The ground shook. Windows shattered. Lights went out. Within moments, the quiet night turned into chaos. People rushed. Security teams tried to respond. But it happened too quickly. That was the reality of modern warfare. Fast, precise, and often unexpected. When the dust began to settle, the truth became clear. Ali Khamenei was dead. The news spread quickly. First inside Iran, then across the world. It shocked many people. Because this was not just any leader. He had ruled since 1989. He had survived many challenges, even an assassination attempt many years ago. But this time, he did not survive. The government announced a period of mourning. People gathered, some in shock, some in silence, some asking questions. How did this happen? Why now? What comes next? Those questions had no easy answers. Because this moment was not just about one man. It was about power, conflict, and years of tension between nations. This event did not happen suddenly. It was the result of many years of conflict between Iran, the United States, and Israel. Disagreements, sanctions, military actions, all building up over time, until one moment changed everything. But what many people don't realize is this. The strike itself was only the final step. The real story started long before that night. And to understand what really happened, you have to go back. Back to the tension. Back to the planning. Back to the decisions that led to that moment. Because in history, big events don't just happen. They are built, step by step. And this was one of those moments. A moment the world would not forget. But also, a moment that would change what came next. Because when a powerful leader is suddenly gone, the story does not end. It only begins. The plan behind the strike. Long before that night, there were meetings. Quiet meetings. In rooms with no windows. In places where no one outside could hear. Men and women sat around tables, looking at screens, maps, data. They were not talking loudly. They were calm. Focused, careful, because what they were planning could change everything. This was not a quick decision. It took time. A lot of time. Months. Maybe even years. Different teams were involved. Intelligence teams. Military planners. Analysts. Each group had one job. To understand. To observe. To wait. They studied patterns. Where the leader moved. What time he stayed in certain places. Who was around him, how security worked. Nothing was random. Every detail mattered. Because one mistake could change the outcome, or even start something bigger. That was the risk. And everyone in that room knew it. One analyst pointed at a screen. He follows a routine, he said. Not every day, but often. Another person nodded. That's our window. They were not rushing. They were waiting for the right moment. The moment when everything aligned. Time, location, opportunity, and low risk of failure. That's how these operations work. Not fast, but precise. Very precise. Far away from those rooms, life continued normally. People went to work. Children went to school. The city moved as always. But behind the scenes, plans were growing. Slowly. Quietly. Carefully. Then came the final phase. Confirmation. They needed to be sure. Absolutely sure. Because once it started, there was no going back. Satellite images were checked. Signals were monitored. Movements were tracked. Everything had to match. One by one, the pieces came together. Yes, someone said. He is there. The room became quiet. Not because people were unsure, but because they understood the weight of the moment. Decisions like this are never simple. They carry consequences. Big ones. One person finally spoke. Proceed. That single word set everything in motion. Systems were activated. Commands were sent. People in different locations began doing their part. Each step connected, like pieces of a puzzle. Far away, in the sky, aircraft were already moving. Not visible. Not loud. Just part of the plan. Technology played a big role. Advanced systems. Precise targeting. Everything designed to be fast and accurate. But even with all that, nothing is ever 100% certain. That's another truth people don't always see. Even the best plans carry risk. Back in the control room, everyone was watching. No one looked away. Screens showed movement. Data updated in real time. Seconds felt longer. Minutes felt heavy. Then, a signal came in. Target confirmed. Another voice followed. Ready. There was no celebration. No excitement. Just focus. Because this was not a movie. This was real. And real decisions have real outcomes. The final command was given. And, in that moment, everything moved forward. No stopping. No turning back. The plan that took so long to build was now happening. But even then, there was one thing no one in that room could fully control. What would happen after? Because actions like this do not end in one moment. They create reactions, questions, consequences, and sometimes more conflict. As the operation continued, everyone waited, watching, listening, knowing that history was being shaped in real time. But the truth is, no plan is ever perfect, and what happened next would show just how complex this situation really was. The aftermath. The moment the strike ended, the world did not stay quiet. News began to spread. Slow at first, then very fast. Phones started ringing. Messages were sent. Leaders were informed. And soon, people everywhere were asking the same question. What just happened? Inside Iran, confusion came first. Then shock. Then silence. People woke up to the news. Some did not believe it. Others waited for confirmation. Because something this big was hard to understand. On the streets, people gathered in small groups, talking quietly, looking at their phones, listening to radio reports, trying to understand the situation. The government responded quickly. Officials appeared on television, speaking carefully, choosing every word. They confirmed the news and announced a period of mourning. Across the country, the mood changed. Everything felt heavier, slower, more serious. This was not just about one person. It was about what he represented. Power, leadership, stability for some, control for others. Now, that was gone. At least for the moment. And when something like that disappears suddenly, it creates a space, a gap. And everyone begins to wonder, who will fill that gap? That was the next big question. Inside government buildings, meetings began immediately. Leaders gathered. Advisors spoke. Plans were discussed. Not just about today, but about tomorrow. And the days after. Because the future now felt uncertain. Very uncertain. Outside the country, reactions came quickly. Different nations responded in different ways. Some called for calm. Some showed concern. Some stayed quiet. Watching. Waiting. Trying to understand what would happen next. Because events like this do not stay in one place. They affect the whole world. That's the reality of global politics. One moment, can change many things. Back inside Iran, emotions were mixed. Some people felt sadness. Some felt fear. Some felt anger. Others just felt unsure. No one knew exactly what would come next. And that uncertainty was the hardest part. In moments like this, people look for answers. But answers take time. And time feels slow when everything is changing. Meanwhile, behind closed doors, more decisions were being made. Security was increased. Important locations were protected. Messages were sent to allies. Warnings were prepared. Because everyone understood one thing. This moment was not the end. It was the beginning of something new. Something unpredictable. And possibly something bigger. Far away from all the noise. In quiet rooms around the world, experts were watching, studying, talking, trying to understand the impact. What happens next? One asked. No one had a clear answer, because situations like this do not follow simple paths. They move in many directions. At the same time, back in the city, life slowly tried to continue. Shops opened. Cars moved. People walked. But something had changed. You could feel it. In the air. In the silence. In the way people looked at each other. It was not just another day. It was a day people would remember. A day that marked a turning point. Daniel, far away from all this, sat in his small room, watching the news. He listened quietly, trying to understand, just like everyone else. Because no matter where you are in the world, moments like this reach you. They remind you how connected everything is, and how quickly things can change. The story that began with one decision had now become something much bigger. A global moment. A moment filled with questions, with uncertainty, with possibilities. And as the world kept watching, one truth became clear. This was not the end of the story. Not even close. Because when something this big happens, the real impact comes after. In the days, the weeks, the months that follow. And no one, not leaders, not experts, not ordinary people, could say for sure what would happen next. What comes next? After the shock came the silence. Not the quiet kind, but the kind where everyone is thinking, waiting, watching. Across Iran, people woke up to a new reality. A reality where things were no longer the same. On the streets, life continued, but slower, more careful. People spoke in lower voices. They looked at each other differently, asking questions without saying them out loud. What happens now? Inside government buildings, the pressure was growing. Leaders sat around tables again. But this time, the situation was different. Before, they were planning. Now, they were reacting. That is much harder, because when you react, you have less control. One official spoke first. We need stability, he said. Another nodded. People need answers. But answers were not easy to give, because the future was not clear. Different ideas were discussed. Different paths. Some wanted calm. Some wanted strong action. Some wanted time to think. Each choice had risks. Big risks. Because one wrong move could make things worse. Far outside the country, other leaders were also watching. Carefully, quietly. They knew this moment was important, not just for one country, but for many. Decisions made here could affect the whole region, maybe even the world. That is how connected things are. Back inside the city, Daniel sat in his room again, watching everything on the small screen. He didn't fully understand the politics, but he understood one thing. Change. Sudden change. He had felt it in his own life, and now, he was seeing it on a much bigger scale. He whispered to himself, everything can change in one moment. That thought stayed with him, because it was true. In life, in prison, and now, in the world. Days began to pass. Slowly, carefully. People waited to see what would happen next. Some expected big changes. Others hoped for calm. But no one knew for sure. That was the hardest part, not knowing. Uncertainty can feel heavier than bad news, because your mind keeps asking questions, over and over again. What if? What next? Inside Iran, small signs of change began to appear. New faces in meetings. New voices speaking. Careful steps being taken. Nothing sudden. Nothing rushed. Because everyone understood the situation was fragile. Very fragile. One wrong step could break everything. And no one wanted that. At the same time, life outside politics continued. Children went to school. Workers went to their jobs. Families sat together at night. That is another truth. Even during big events, life goes on. But it goes on differently. With a new feeling. A new awareness. People pay more attention. They listen more. They think more. Because they know something important has changed. Back in his room, Daniel turned off the TV. He sat in silence. Again. But this time, the silence felt different. Not empty, but full of thoughts. He realized something. Big events and small lives are not so different. They both face change. They both face uncertainty. And they both must move forward, even when the path is not clear. Daniel stood up slowly. He walked to the window, looked outside. Cars moving, people walking, life continuing. He took a deep breath. For the first time since he left prison, he didn't feel completely lost. Still unsure, still confused, but not frozen, because he understood something new. Not knowing what comes next is part of life. Not just outside prison, but everywhere. Even for leaders. Even for countries. Even for the world. He whispered quietly. Maybe it's okay not to know. That thought was small, but powerful, because it gave him something he didn't have before. A little bit of peace. The world was still changing. Still uncertain. Still unpredictable. But Daniel was starting to accept it. Step by step. Just like everything else. And far beyond his small room, the story continued. Leaders would make decisions. People would react. The future would slowly take shape. No one could see it clearly yet, but it was coming. One step at a time. Because that is how history moves. Not all at once, but slowly. Through choices. Through moments. Through people. And this moment was just one part of a much bigger story. A story that was still being written. By decisions, by actions, and by what comes next.